Chapter 9. A Slip of the Tongue. The next morning a dull, grey, cloudy sky threatened rain. Chelsea arrived at our house around 7:45 to walk to school with Gib. I had the misfortune to be the one who opened the door for him. Immediately he started grinning at me. His constant grin was really cheesing me off. I glared at him. "I'm glad you can find something funny in all this." I had the satisfaction of seeing the smile slip off his face. "Victoria, I wasn't laughing." Ignoring him, I went back into the kitchen to finish my breakfast. "Gib's upstairs in his room," I said when Chauncey followed me into the kitchen. Chauncey danced uncomfortably from foot to foot as he watched me. "I wasn't laughing because I think what you and Gib are going through is funny," Chauncey said. "Then what were you grinning like an idiot about?" I thought frostily, spooning cornflakes into my mouth. I thought if I ignored him, he'd bug off. "You don't like me much, do you?" Chauncey said quietly. Surprised, I turned to face him. "Like you? Why not?" Chauncey asked. I'd never seen him looking so serious. My face fell as I watched him. All of a sudden I felt really uncomfortable, really nasty. I began to squirm on my chair. "You don't like me much either," I defended myself. "Yes, I do," Chauncey replied immediately. It was just as well I was sitting down when he said that, or I would have keeled over from shock. My whole body went hot, even my fingernails. "You do?" I whispered. Chauncey nodded. For a brief second I believed him, until I remembered all the times Chauncey and Gib had stood side by side laughing at me. He was probably on a serious wind-up right now. His whole act was probably something he'd set up with Gib. "You don't fool me, Alexandra Chaucer. I know you're just pulling my leg," I said with disgust. "I'm not," Chauncey protested. "All right then, if you like me so much, why are you always laughing at me? You're always making me feel really stupid." I glared at him to let him know that I knew what he was up to. This was a wind-up, if ever I saw one. "I never laugh at you." If the shock in Chauncey's voice was put on, then he deserved an Oscar. I sat back in my chair. I'm not daft, you know," I said angrily. "I have eyes. I only have to look at you before you start grinning. Do I really look that funny to you?" "I'm smiling at you. I've been trying to show you I like you for ages," Chauncey said. His face was a deep shade of beetroot now. I stared at him. Even his neck had turned fiery red. I didn't know what to say. He looked so embarrassed that I knew he was serious. I got even more angry with him. "Take a tip from me then," I offered. "Don't grin at me. Your smile is not your best feature." "Okay, I'll remember that." Chauncey smiled, then quickly stopped. For the first time he looked almost sane. Only then did it sink in. Chauncey liked me. Ugh. An embarrassed silence fell between us. I'll go and find Gib," Chauncey stammered, as he tore out of the kitchen as if he'd been shot from a cannon. I couldn't get over it. Ugh, he liked me. But he was still a prize twit. 10 minutes later, I was up in my room, writing out a fresh envelope for Miss Hiff's letter that I'd brought home. Mum was having a late lie-in, and Dad was downstairs watching telly after helping Gib and me prepare our breakfast. Dad was in a very sombre mood. He tried to pretend that the break from work was just what he needed, but anyone with half an eye could see he was missing it. Now was obviously not the best time to hand over Miss Hiff's letter. Yesterday evening I had waited for the ideal moment to arrive so that I could explain what had actually happened at school. I'd waited and waited. Deep down, I knew that there would never be an ideal moment. If it carried on like this, I'd never hand over the letter, and then Mum and Dad would hear all about it from Miss Hiff instead. And I certainly didn't want that. I couldn't risk Miss Hiff trying to phone Dad at home, or worse still, at work. She wouldn't do anything today, though. Fingers crossed. I reckon she'd wait all day to hear from Dad. So I had one more day, at the very most. Tonight. I'd do it tonight. Not now, though. The thought of it had my heart pounding. Looking down at the envelope, I sighed and wondered what Gib and Chauncey were up to. If Chauncey had been winding me up after all, then I'd never speak to him again. Never. Never. There was a knock at my door. It had to be Mum or Dad. Gib had never knocked in his life. Hiding the envelope under my pillow, I said, "Come in." It was Chauncey, followed closely by Gib, who closed the door behind him. "Oh, what do you two want?" I frowned, ready to laugh back if I was laughed at first. "I told Chauncey about what we did yesterday," Gib said. "I want to help," said Chauncey. I wondered if there was anything Gib wouldn't tell his best friend. "What can you do?" I asked Chauncey. "I don't know. I just wanted you to know that I can help if you need it," Chauncey said. I shrugged. "Okay." "Are you coming to school now?" Gib asked. "No, I've got something to finish," I replied, holding up the envelope. "What's that?" Chauncey asked. I tapped my nose. "See you at school," I said, and I turned back to my envelope. I was walking with Gail and Maggie on our way to the canteen for lunch when Miss Hiff passed us in the corridor. I lowered my head and began to walk faster, but it was no use. "Ah, Vicky, I was looking for you," Miss Hiff said from behind me. Grimacing, I stopped in my tracks and turned slowly. "Hello, Miss Hiff," I said faintly. Miss Hiff nodded at me. "When can I expect a call from your father?" Sometime today, miss, I would think," I said. "I hope so," Miss Hiff frowned. "Otherwise I shall be phoning him at work first thing tomorrow morning." "No, Miss Hiff," I panicked. "He'll phone you. He said he would." The last thing I wanted was for Miss Hiff to find out that Dad had been suspended from his bank. The headmistress eyed me suspiciously. "Tomorrow, Victoria," she said at last. "Yes, miss." I dug my hands deep into my pockets, terrified that Miss Hiff would see the letter with a brand new envelope in my right-hand pocket. I'd wanted to leave it at home, but what if Mum and Dad found it? Bringing it to school made me break out in an ice-cold sweat every time I walked past the teacher, but so far, so good. I'd never done anything like this before, and I was never going to do anything like it again. I dug a hole for myself by reading the letter, and I could see no way out of it. Miss Hiff drew herself up to her full 1 metre nothing and marched on. "What was that all about?" Maggie asked curiously. I sighed, then shrugged. "The maths exam last Friday," I said, plumping for the truth. Goodness, that was only 3 days ago. Such a lot had happened since then. I felt like I was spinning and spinning, and I couldn't stop. Everything was happening at once, and I couldn't control it. "Yeah, I meant to ask you what that was all about. Did you cheat?" Gail asked. Shocked, I stopped walking and looked at her. I was dangerously close to forgetting that Gail was one of my best friends. "What do you think?" I said angrily. "I would say not, but you never know." Gail trailed off as she looked at Maggie. Maggie glanced down at her shoes, a slow flush creeping over her face. I frowned at both of them. Then I remembered Maggie, with her nose deep in her pencil case during our maths exam. If I'd seen her, then maybe Gail had too. Anyway, they don't think I was cheating in the exam, I explained. Someone stole the answers beforehand, and they think it was me, because I finished so quickly. Whereas we all know it was the hacker supreme, Maggie grinned. "So that's what this fuss is all about," Gail breathed. "Someone actually fleeced the answers." "Yeah, only I didn't do it," I said fiercely. "The trouble is..." Just then someone tapped me on the shoulder. It was Gib. "Where are you going?" he asked, ignoring my friends. "For some lunch," I replied. Since when was Gib interested in my eating habits? "We can use a PC in the science block," Gib said pointedly. "For what?" "The E. Jones proof," he replied. I understood at once. "Gail, Maggie, I'll catch you up later," I told them. "Vicky," Gail protested. "It's jam tart for dessert." "I've got something more important to do," I said quickly. "Honest." "Oh, all right then," Gail said, in a voice that said it wasn't all right. I left them to it and walked with Gib to the science block. "Chauncey's holding a PC for us," Gib explained. So we can try to get the proof we need that Eric put the money in Dad's account. How do we do that? I haven't a clue. I was hoping you'd know that, Gib replied. Ugh, typical. Look, now isn't a very good time to hack into the bank system, I said. I'm far more likely to be discovered by one of the operators if I use it right now. We can't use the computers here tonight. The evening courses go on all week, and we can't use the same excuse twice. That tutor Rosa is bound to ask us more questions this time, Gib pointed out. Suppose so, I conceded. I stopped in my tracks and stared at Gib. It was as if a light bulb had been switched on in my head. Gib, I've got to do something, I told him. What? He frowned. Something, I said impatiently. Are you going to be in room 22 or 24? Room 22, Gib frowned. I started to run back to the canteen. But Vicky, I'll see you in a few minutes, I called out to him. I raced to the canteen. One single thought kept hammering in my head, and I couldn't get it to go away. There was something I had to find out. I caught up with Maggie and Gail, who'd been joined by Carolyn, just as they were sitting down with their lunch trays. Maggie, can I talk to you? I puffed. Go on, Em, she said, surprised. Outside, I said. She frowned at me. It's important. I'll be quick, I told her. Slowly, Maggie stood up, and I followed her out of the canteen to stand just outside the door. I waited until a group of 5 from another class walked past us into the canteen before speaking. Maggie, how did you know the name of the person who stole Mrs. Bracken's maths answers? I asked. What are you talking about? Maggie frowned. You heard me, I said carefully. How did you know the person's name? I didn't. I don't. Unless you just told me now. Maggie shrugged. I didn't say one word about the person's name, I said. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm talking about the Hacker Supreme, I said coldly. That's the first thing you said when I told you why I was hauled up in front of Miss Hiff. It's just an expression. I didn't mean anything by it. Maggie scowled. She tried to walk past me, back into the canteen. I pushed the door to stop her. Oh, no, you don't, I said. You're the person who pinched the exam answers. Oh, don't be ridiculous, Maggie said furiously. I'm not. There's no way you could know what the real culprit signed at the bottom of the message left for Crackly Bracken unless you're that person. Listen, I know nothing about breaking into Mrs. Bracken's PC and leaving messages, Maggie said, her eyes narrowed. I folded my arms across my chest. How did you know the real thief broke into Mrs. Bracken's PC? I never said that. I said the exam answers had been pinched. Maggie's mouth dropped open. You said something about a hacker. No, you said it. I didn't. It was you. Whatever. No, tell me. You've got me in dead serious trouble. Miss Hiff is talking about suspending me for hacking into Mrs. Bracken's file, and it wasn't me. It was you. You reckon all this just because I said Hacker Supreme? Maggie said scornfully. That and the fact that you knew about the message being on Crackly Bracken's PC. I didn't mention that bit just now. Move, Vicky, Maggie ordered. My lunch is getting cold. It's going to get a lot colder, I told her. I want you to tell Miss Hiff that it was you and not me who pinched the answers to the maths exam. I'll do no such thing, Maggie said. If you don't, I will. I'm not a snitch, but I'm going to get suspended for you. No way, I fumed. Maggie's fists clenched at her sides. My body went stiff. I dropped my arms, ready for her. I thought you were my friend, Maggie said. I am, but if you were my friend, you wouldn't let me take the blame for you, I replied. I'm going to see Miss Hiff right this minute. I turned to march away. Maggie grabbed me by my arm hard. Vicky, you can't. Not that I'm admitting for a moment that I did it, Maggie added quickly. Then why grab my arm? I asked frostily. We'll just see what Miss Hiff has to say about this. Vicky, please, you don't understand. Maggie was close to tears now. My dad's just started his own business, and I have to type all his letters and invoices because he can't afford a proper full-time secretary. I haven't had time to do any homework or revise or anything. Mum and Dad have been arguing about it for months. If I say anything, Miss Hiff will call my parents up to the school, and then things will just get worse." Maggie looked absolutely miserable. I didn't know what to do. "Why don't you tell your dad that he can do that you can't do his work as well as your own?" I suggested. "What? And give Dad and Mum more to quarrel about? Things are bad enough at home as it is," Maggie replied. Her eyes were shimmering, her lips turned down. "Maggie, I'm sorry, I really am, but I'm not going to let myself get excluded from school for you or for anyone else." I felt like a right cow saying that, but what choice did I have? "Please, Vicky, I'll make it up to you. I swear I will," Maggie pleaded. "No, Maggie, I can't. I'm sorry." I shook my head. "Why on earth did you leave that message at the bottom of Crackly Bracken's file anyway? It was a stupid thing to do." I was just showing off, I suppose," Maggie said unhappily. "Seemed like a funny thing to do at the time." "Well, it wasn't. It was stupid," I replied. "You should never have done it. You should never have cheated." "Vicky, please." "No, Maggie," I said firmly. "If you tell on me, I swear I'll never speak to you again. And what's more, I'll make sure that everyone knows what a grass you are. No one will speak to you." Maggie threatened. She shouldn't have said that. I'd been feeling really bad up until then, and wondering if maybe there was a way to keep Maggie out of it and get away with it myself. But when she said that, "Go ahead. If you think you're bad," I replied. Maggie drew herself up and gave me the filthiest look she could. She took her time over it too. "Get out of my way," she said, pushing me. "Fight, fight," someone called out from inside the canteen. Looking at Maggie, I knew she wanted me to push her back. She did want to fight. I was really tempted to push her back. I was in the mood for a fight myself, but I didn't. She pushed me again before walking past me back into the canteen. I watched her as she walked towards her table. I saw her point at me as she started to speak to Caroline and Gail. I turned around and went to the girls' loos. I put the lid down and sat. "You had no choice, Victoria," I tried to tell myself. It didn't help. Now I wished I had pushed her back. Inside I was raging, angry at everything and everyone. All the anger and the hurt sat inside my chest like a concrete football. Burying my head in my hands, I wished myself away on another planet, in another galaxy. I just wanted to be as far away from school as possible. I mean, what did Maggie expect? How could she possibly make it up to me? Detention was one thing. Getting excluded was something else entirely. Over and over I kept going through the reasons for not taking the blame. Each one was valid, reasonable. So why didn't they make me feel better? Maggie had been my friend since we were in infants together. What was I going to do? If I told on Maggie, I knew she meant it. She would never speak to me again.